Hi, and welcome to this special edition of Speak On It with author and cartoonist Robin Ha. This event is a joint effort between U Media and Chicago Public Library's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Committee. Speak On It connects teens and authors virtually to have a conversation about what speaks to us and inspires us to create. My name is Rachel, and I'm a librarian with the Chicago Public Library who loves comics and graphic novels of all kinds. Today, we're going to hang out, get creative, and geek out with Robin Ha. Robin is the author and illustrator of the graphic memoir, Almost American Girl, and the graphic cookbook, Cook Korean. Almost American Girl portrays her unexpected move, culture shock, and adjustment to life in the U.S. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. And if you're looking for cooking inspiration, especially during these strange COVID times, Cook Korean is amazing. A little bit about Robin. Robin grew up reading and drawing comics in Seoul, South Korea, and moved to Huntsville, Alabama in 1995 when she was 14. She graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design and moved to New York City following graduation. Robin worked in the fashion industry for several years before diving into comics and is currently based in Washington, D.C. Don't forget, if you're turning in live and have a question for Robin, just drop it in the chat and I'll make sure it gets to her. Welcome, Robin. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm a big fan of both of your books and your art. I'm super geeked out right now. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great, and considering everything. And thank you so much for inviting me here. This is very exciting.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I figured we can start with some questions and then go from there and move into, you're also going to do an awesome sketch session today, more towards the middle of the program. So we have that. But starting out, you talk about your love of writing and drawing a lot in Almost American Girl. Mm-hmm. But when did you actually decide to do comics professionally? And when you started, were you more of a writer or an illustrator at heart?
Well, I always wanted to be a cartoonist ever since I could read comics. But I haven't really pursued it professionally until maybe late 2000, like 2008. I think that's around the time that I quit working my day job at fashion company and just trying to do some freelance in comics. So it took me a long time, even though I always wanted to be a cartoonist since I was a little girl. And I definitely was more of an illustrator than a writer. Like, I started drawing other people's script. So I was like a hired artist for other cartoon writers first. And it's not until I actually was pitching Cook Korean that's when I started to write my own comics.
That's awesome. When you're making your own comics, what do you find more challenging making original content, writing or illustrating?
I think writing is definitely a big challenge for me. I'm still learning about it, and it's really different side of brain from like drawing, you know? But the thing is, I've always loved to read, even when I was a little person, and I always thought about ideas for comics, but I've never actually sat down and wrote like start, middle, and the end, you know? So I had, big notebook full of ideas, but nothing finished. So it's been a huge challenge for me even now that I have to kind of work towards finishing a story and make like a novel instead of just ideas.
I know that I'm an idea person too. I totally I've started dabbling and finally making my ideas into comics, and I've gotten as far as doing 1-page shorter stories because It's hard to generate ideas and move forward. And yeah, for sure.
Great. You should start small and finish it, and then just keep growing the numbers of pages, and you'll get there someday, you know?
What have you been reading these days, and what are some of your favorite all-time reads?
So I have a couple of books here. This comic is called The Rose of Versailles this is seriously my all-time favorite comic since I was like 7 years old. It came out in the early 70s. It's a Japanese comic book called manga. And it's a historical fiction based on French Revolution. So there's Marionette,
that's cool.
And, big poofy dresses. And, it's just like a really classic Japanese girls comic. So I grew up reading this and I still love it. And so this publisher, what publisher is this? Released basically it's a really long series, so they combined like 3 volumes into one, and they their hardcover like last year. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and then this one is another book that I got during COVID time.
Oh yes.
And this is a really amazing book. It's a biographical book about a comfort woman. She is an old lady now, I think in her like 80s. But when Korea was occupied by Japan in the early 1900s, she was kidnapped by Japanese government basically and sent to China to be forced into sex working, And it's a very, very difficult topic, but it's definitely a book that you should pick up and read, because it's a history that we really need to think about and discuss instead of trying to put it off. So yeah, grasp.
I read that and I was blown away. And I wrote a Chicago Public Library staff pick for that title too. So if viewers look up that title in our library catalog, they can read my review along with the publisher reviews. But that book has so much history in it, and I learned so much from it. And I only knew little snippets of it because we didn't really learn a lot about it in school. But that book, it's amazing. That's a good one for sure.
I love the art style in it because it's very artistic. It's very loose, so it really captures the emotion more than like just facts. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion in her, like her use of inking too. Like you can feel it when you visually look at it. It's really good.
Definitely. I'm glad that you read it too. That's
good. Yeah, I loved it. It was so good. Yeah, that's awesome. Yay. So yeah, that's one of my reads too. And I've just been loading up on an insane amount of comics. They're my favorite, obviously, but yeah, of all kinds, fiction and nonfiction.
At home, so you can catch up on all this reading.
Yeah. Let's talk food, like from Cook Korean. You create a lot of content about food, like in your book, Cook Korean, but you also have other mini comics like Souped Up Ramen and Just Banchan and numerous food illustrations. Have you had a go-to comfort food during COVID?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely ramen. I love ramen. So the recipes in Souped Up Ramen are, like my go-to recipes basically. And, like instant ramen isn't really good for you, but it's just something I crave whenever I'm stressed out or I'm tired. It's just, like I grew up eating it. So if you put a lot of vegetable and, you can soup it up to make it more nutritious.
Actually, too, quick food tip. If you have leftover turkey, it's really good in ramen. I made that on Monday. I used Sapporo Ichiban rice cakes, turkey, scallions, cabbage, mushrooms, a whole bunch of stuff. And it was delicious. Yeah. That's my comfort food too. And then in Cook Korean, you shared your food journey, and you actually didn't really start cooking until you were in college, or at least not, a lot. Right. Do you have any tips for viewers who are in a similar boat, who haven't really explored cooking at an earlier age, on how to get started? And do you have any recommendations on like easy food types or dishes to kind of get into?
I think it's first thing is that you shouldn't be afraid of cooking, because that was my problem growing up, that I just was really apprehensive about going into the kitchen. So I think just, put your fear aside and just pick one recipe. And I think a lot of the recipes might look complicated, but like if you actually dive into it, you'll figure out they're actually not that hard or complicated. So I think learning like basic recipes you can easily cook at home, like pasta or like stir-fried rice, things like that you can like use every day, is a great recipe to start. If you have this book, Cook Korean, this is a very, very easy book. Like I have never heard anybody saying this is too difficult to follow. So I think this is a great book for the beginners. And there is a recipe here called kimchi jjigae, which is stewed kimchi stew. Mm-hmm. And it's super simple, and it's like my second favorite comfort food. Basically, you throw all, kimchi and pork and everything in a pot, and you boil it. It's so simple, and it's very satisfying. So I'll recommend that recipe to start with.
Yeah, and viewers can totally check that book out through the CPL catalog too, along with Almost American Girl. But yes, definitely recommend Cook Korean. The visuals in it are very easy to follow, and it's not overwhelming like an all text cookbook where it's just like blocks of text, and then you're just like, oh, I don't know what any of this is supposed to look like as I'm going along. Like it's very instructional. And I thought that was really cool. Like it's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I started making that book, because I love reading cookbooks. I borrow a lot of cookbooks from the libraries, but a lot of them are really text heavy. And especially if it's an ethnic cookbook, then it can be very daunting to figure out what these ingredients are like and how you're supposed to cut them or prep them. So that's how first idea came to me of making this comic book.
That's awesome. And speaking of Almost American Girl, congratulations on all of the awards and recognition. NPR, one of the best comic books of the year. I think it was a list of 20 for those. So that's huge. It's so well-deserved. And writing a memoir just in general seems like a very daunting task, let alone making an illustrated memoir. What was the most difficult part of telling your story in this kind of a format?
I think making comics, whether it's a memoir, nonfiction, or fiction, it's basically the same process, but just emotionally it was very hard because I had to talk about a lot of things that wasn't really pleasant or happy that happened during my lifetime, and also a lot to do with my mother, who was a single mother, raising me alone in Korea, which was very stigmatized to be a single mother. So all of that history, just digging up the history that was still pretty painful for both my mom and I, and trying to do, a good job to tell the story truthfully. I think that was the most difficult part.
Yeah, and if readers haven't read it yet, I definitely recommend that they read the conclusion information after the comic portion that talks about your getting it done and working with your mom to figure out different parts of it and kind of talking to her about it because it reveals a lot about the kind of process and the things you have to consider about opening yourself up in that way.
Yeah. Because it's not like people are just judging you for your art or cool story. It's like you're putting your entire life out there when you're writing a...
Right. And everyone else that's in it too. So it's kind of that's a lot.
It's very scary,
Yeah. And you moved to the U.S. in 1995. This is one thing I thought of too, how do you think your immigration story and experience beginning school right when you got here basically would be different if you were to move here in current times instead, what do you want readers to take away from your immigration experience in this way?
I think the kids who are immigrating now would have a lot easier time keeping in touch with their friends and, the books they're reading, because you have an internet now. In the mid-90s, there wasn't any internet. So even just calling people in Korea was almost impossible. It was really expensive. So I only had to rely on snail mail to keep in touch with my friends. So in that way, I think kids these days are pretty lucky. But I think it might actually be harder for them to get used to living in the US because they have so many means to basically run away from the reality. They can just hide in their room and, talk to their friends online instead of trying to make friends in American school. So I think it can go both ways. It might be a little easier in the beginning to not feel so lonely and, just alone. But it might actually, I think, can kind of hinder kids from, being accustomed to American life. So I don't know. Everything is like that, right? There's always cons and pro.
Yeah, everything's more complicated than it seems, and nothing's cut and dry for sure.
Yeah.
Because I in Almost American Girl, there were like those points where you were waiting for letters from your friends, and like there was so much time passing because it was so slow that it like made you sad that like you thought they forgot about you, but then eventually the letters would show up, and that had to have been such a long wait.
Oh yeah, I mean it seemed like forever, But I think that sense of loneliness would still exist for kids who are immigrating now too. It's never the same as like going to school with your best friends.
Right.
You can keep in touch with them, but it's never the same as being right next to them. So I hope that my book can show kids that it's okay to feel that way. It's very normal to feel alone and just confused all the time. And hopefully, you'll believe in yourself that it will get better, like how it got better in my book,
Yeah, eventually you made new friends, and then you went to that really awesome like comic class. That was after you moved out of Alabama though, right?
No, it was still in Alabama.
Okay, that's right.
So my mom found this comic book shop in the middle of nowhere, and she found a comic book class. So that's where I first made my American friend after months.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that really helped me to find my footing in the new, town. And, because we had so much in common, mainly manga, all the kids in that class were into manga, and I was drawing and sort of manga-ish style. So they were very, very interested in getting to know me. So it really helped me a lot to, not feel so scared to talk to them. And, we began
a common interest.
Really important thing. You need to have something you're passionate about, and that can connect you to new friends no matter where you are.
Yeah, it's so true. Even if like your skills are different or your focus is different, if there's that like common shared interest,
right,
all sorts of things can happen.
Definitely. And that's why library is important, because that's kids can come and, freely check out books that they love to read. And, having programs like this in the library, especially, I think it really helps kids develop their skill and their hobbies.
And find themselves, which is always good, or at least forge themselves forward. Yeah. So you're going to do some sketching for us, which is awesome. What kind of program are you going to use, and how do you want to get started?
Okay, so can you guys see this? I am sharing my screen now. You can see it?
I can see it. Yeah.
Awesome. So these days, most cartoonists actually use the digital program to make comics. Back in the days, people used pen and paper, but now people use either like Photoshop or Illustrator or this program that I'm using, which is called Clip Studio Paint, and this is a Japanese program made for manga artists. But this is a really great tool to have if you're really serious about making comics, because you can lay all the pages of your graphic novel in one screen, and you can edit your page that way. So it's a really great tool especially if you're making a long form comics. But I'm basically just gonna show you how making comic in this program works. So Rachel shared with me something really cool that happened to her recently, and I'm gonna draw that as a comic page here. Would you like to remind me what your experience?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So there's a neighborhood cat that kind of just hangs out on the block down from me. He sleeps on various people's porches. So one day recently, I hadn't seen him for like 2 months, but I rode by that block on my bike and I saw him snoozing on a porch. So I turned my bike around, went up onto the sidewalk, and he was totally asleep. So I poked him. Mm-hmm. And he woke up and jumped down and started meowing, and he always begs for pets. His name is Peanut, and he's super adorable. So I pet him for a while, but I was on my way home from work, so I wanted to go home. So I started walking my bike down the sidewalk, and he kept following me, meowing, basically like at the back of my heels the whole time. And as we were walking, an Amazon delivery driver was trying to walk onto the sidewalk past us to put a package over someone's fence, and the cat totally cut off the Amazon person. And they were like, "Whoa, is that your cat?" And I was like, "No, it's not my cat." So then I walked to the corner and pet him a whole bunch until he flopped over like cats do. And once he didn't realize what was going on, I just basically ran away. But when I looked back over my shoulder, he was still sitting on the sidewalk when I got home, like in the same spot.
Oh, he really missed you.
Yeah.
Did you call the cat's name, or you just...
Usually, I call his name if I'm walking down the sidewalk, and he'll run up to me meowing right away. But this time he was sleeping. So I kind of snuck up on him when I poked him, and then he woke up.
Oh, okay.
But the whole time I was walking down the sidewalk, I was telling him Peanut, you have to stay. Don't follow me home. Mm-hmm. When you're drawing, what's your favorite thing about drawing?
I think drawing just has been always my mode of expression, Even when I was a little girl, my mother always encouraged me to draw because she was also really into art. So whenever I had some, things that's going on in my head, I always drew it before I wrote about it, because it's just what I was really used to since I was very little. So I think it's both a great tool for me to show people what I am talking about or what's going on inside of me. And also it's kind of like a meditational tool for me, when I draw, and if it's going well, then it really calms my mind and I can forget about everything that's going on that's hard in my life. So Yeah, I think it's been both, fun hobby when I was little, and now it's what I do for a living.
Do you try to separate drawing in your life for fun versus drawing for work?
Well, these days I don't really have much time to draw for fun, which is kind of sad, because I'm drawing constantly, like from the moment I open my eyes in the morning till when I go to bed. So it's hard for me to draw on my off time, like when I am actually taking time off, like for Thanksgiving or something like that. I try not to draw so much because I need to take a break from it, to recharge my battery.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, I do still try to make art for fun, but they're not really comics. I usually make painting or collages, something that doesn't really involve drawing. Like I want to use my creative mind for some other field of art, like photography. I love taking photos, just to kind of like get me more interested in new things. And I reserve drawing comics basically for my book because it's a long book. I'm working on a new book right now, and it's a very, very involved, long fiction book. So it's taking me a long, long time to finish it. So that's what I'm doing, 9 to 5 every day, more like 9 to 10 sometimes. And I draw or make collages for fun in the weekend.
That's really cool.
So as you can see, so this is kind of like what you do when you first start making comics. You make a very, very rough sketch, basically to lay out your scene. So if you are trying to make comics, I recommend you to be very rough at first and try not to finish drawing everything because chances are you're going to have to make a lot of changes before you are set with a design. And this is the UPS man. And then what happened? This cat kept following you, or he stopped somewhere?
Yeah, it followed me to the corner, and then I basically rubbed its belly until it was so happy that it didn't realize I started to run away. I tricked Peanut with a lot of pets.
So it's showing you the belly. Oops. And then
Lots of purrs.
and then you're walking away. I guess these are the houses. I'm gonna just draw very quickly here. Your neighborhood. Trees. Guess that's it.
That is so cool. We have a question. I know you talked a little bit about the program that you use, but they also wanted to know what programs and equipment do you use for digital art? Yeah.
So I recently bought iPad. So that was like my COVID treat. I needed some new toy to play with. So I splurged and got an iPad. And iPad has a program called Procreate, which is like, it's very cheap. It's like $10 or something like that. And you buy it and you can use it forever. Whereas this program, Clip Studio Paint, it's a little bit more pricey and they're subscription based. So if you're just getting into digital drawing, I think if you do have an iPad, I think Procreate is a great tool to get started using. And I think iPad pen, like iPencil, is also really, really good for digital drawing. It really does feel like a real pencil. So Procreate is great. If you're a little more serious and you think you're gonna like really go full force into illustration work, then I think Photoshop is definitely the tool of the day. Most digital artists use Photoshop. And Illustrator is also a really great tool. And both of them are in Adobe Creative Suite. And I think those are, they're subscription based, like monthly. So that's a great tool. So Photoshop, Procreate, Illustrator, and Clip Studio Paint. So those are the tools I use these days.
Thank you. That's awesome. And just in general, being creative during COVID times has been tough for a lot of people, including myself. How have you been coping? And do you have any tips on how to kind of get motivated or at least, stay on track with the creative mind?
Yeah, it is very difficult to be creative or do anything during COVID, I think, because you are stressed, and stress is a really bad thing for creativity. So I think it's when things are just not working out and you just can't seem to be creative or do anything productive, I think we should all remember this is a very, very special time. We've never had this kind of event happen to us before. And just to be kind of kind to ourselves, and it's okay to take a break. It's probably better to take a break than trying to sit and just try to finish it. Especially art doesn't really happen when you force it. So if you can't get in the groove, just take a break, go for a walk, play with your dog or cat, just break. Yeah. And I get a lot of inspiration by other people online, actually. So I follow a lot of great artists on Instagram and Twitter, and So I would like look at what they're doing, and try to pick up some new tools that I've never tried. So during COVID time, I learned to use this monoprint technique called jelly plate.
Oh, yeah, jelly plate printing is so cool.
Fun. And I was like, I always make work on my computer, which is very quick and convenient, but it's not really spontaneous, or there's always like a little bit of a divide or a wall between me and the art, I feel like.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun to just get my hand covered in, paint and have all these papers around me and just making a mess. So I think just trying to learn new things, even if it's like you've never heard of it before, is very important to keep your creativity going.
Those are great tips.
Okay, sure.
And then we're getting close to the end on time. This has been awesome. 2 final finale questions.
Sure.
What do you want readers to take out of your memoir? And how would you encourage, or not readers and viewers, how would you encourage them in writing or illustrating their own stories?
I think I would love for anybody who read my book to feel empathy towards people who are not like them. We are all human beings. We all have our history and our emotions. So I think just be a little more patient and understanding of others is all I can hope for from my book. And I think for anybody who's trying to be a cartoonist, my advice is to start small and finish your comic. Like Rachel, like you can start with 1 page, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy or unique or whatever. You can just start with your diary or something. Something cool that happened to you today. You can just draw that as a 1-page comic with like maybe 5-6 panels, and then if you do that consistently, by the end of the month you're gonna have 20-30 page book. That's how you make comic. It's like 1 page at a time. So please don't start at your first book as a grand 300 page book. That take a long time and you're gonna get really tired before you finish it. So just start small and finish it.
Yeah, tired and stressed out, like to the point where you might just stop.
Exactly.
And then what is the best way to keep up with you, and what's next for you? I know you mentioned that you're working on another substantial book right now. That's super exciting.
So my new book, the tentative title is called The Fox Maidens, and it's a fantasy set in Joseon, which is a kingdom. Before Korea was Korea, we used to be a kingdom of, with king and, aristocrats and commoners and all that. So it's kind of set in historical time in Korea, but it's completely fantasy. It's very action driven, and there's a lot of magic and really fierce female characters. I think I am very driven to tell stories from a strong female protagonist. So that's what I'm working on right now. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, my handle is Robin Ha Art.
Thank you so much. This was so cool. I'm still super geeked out. Thanks for making time for us. And thanks everyone for stopping in and viewing this special Speak on It. It was amazing. So now we'll say bye to viewers. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Hey, this was great. Thank you
so much.